Major funding for this program and for the related college television course, Brain, Mind, and Behavior, is provided by the Annenberg CPB Project. Program funding is also provided by the James S. McDonnell Foundation, supporting significant programs in education, research to improve human life and global understanding, agencies of the U.S. Public Health Service, the National Science Foundation, and Ciba Geigy, science serving mankind in medicine, industry, agriculture, and the home.
Humans are closely related to many species of animals. We share nerve structure with the squid, brainstem with the alligator, and emotional systems with the cat and rat. 98% of our genes are exactly like those of a chimpanzee. And yet, we are unique. We seem to be the only species that communicates symbolically in complex language and that plans in intricate ways for the future. The difference is due mainly to an amazing network of cells that in our species has reached an astonishing level of development, the cerebral cortex, the outer layer of the brain. In this program, we'll explore its wrinkled and divided landscape. The divided brain originated about 100 million years ago in the first mammals. It evolved slowly. Then, with the dawn of man, the cortex began to develop more quickly and helped change forever the nature of life on Earth. Scientists are now exploring the secrets of the divided cortex. They have examined what each hemisphere does and how the two cooperate with each other. They're studying sex differences, left and right-handedness, the effect of culture on the brain's organization, and the neurological roots of language, all to discover the special character of the human brain. We are like no other animal on Earth. We shape our environment to our liking. We give form and substance to our imagination, in words, in pictures, in clay. Anne Nicole is a gifted French sculptress. When she works, her hands take orders from her cortex, the hallmark of our species. Anne's hands are tools, but the seat of her creativity, of her drive to mold this clay into something more, is her brain. The cortex, the wrinkled outer layer of the brain, orchestrates talents and skills. It's a network of nerve cells. Music, language, mathematics, problem solving, and face recognition all are activated here among the billions of neuronal connections. The human brain is an organ made for discovery. It explores, it synthesizes, it takes pleasure in creation. The part of the brain most responsible for this activity is the neocortex, which has developed fully only in the last 1 million years. The secrets of our most human qualities lie hidden in its landscape. The two halves of the brain may look alike, but they're not. They're asymmetrical. They don't have identical skills and abilities. Each side has its own way of knowing the world and processing information. By and large, each side controls the opposite side of the body. When you move your right hand, the left side of the brain is at work. When you move your left hand, the right hemisphere is in control. Most people have a dominant hand, a sign of the brain's asymmetry. Most Most mental functions, like language and spatial skills, are generally housed in one hemisphere or the other. This division of responsibility makes evolutionary sense. Harvard University's Dr. Norman Geschwind.
It's been increasingly clear that each half of the brain has lots of specializations, so that what's going on one side is different from what's going on in the corresponding area on the other side. Now, the advantage of that is that it simply increases the intelligence, if you will, because if you've got an area which is specialized on one side for, let's say, things related to language, it's advantageous to have the area on the other side be doing something different, because it adds one more string to your intellectual bow, so to speak.
Normally, both sides of the brain work in concert. A massive system of fibers called the corpus callosum carries impulses to and from each side.
Have a silver clip ready, please.
In the early 1960s, surgeons revived an old technique of cutting the corpus callosum to control massive seizures in some epileptics. The operation works. It also provides an opportunity to study the different properties of the two hemispheres.
Right hemisphere is gently moved away from the midline.
Vicky is a split brain patient. Because of her epilepsy, surgeons severed her corpus callosum. But now her right hemisphere can no longer communicate directly with her left.
I knew what I wanted to wear, and I would open up my closet, get ready to take it out. My other hand would just take control. It would reach in and get something that I wouldn't want at all. You know, and then I get, I don't know, frustrated, and I throw the one on the bed that I don't want. Instead, a lot of times I can't even hang them back up.
This antagonistic behavior between hands occurs only right after split brain surgery. It takes special testing to reveal the different processing styles of the two hemispheres. Vicky is tested frequently at Cornell Medical Center by Dr. Michael Gazzaniga.
Okay, look right at the dot.
Okay.
The tests are designed to send different kinds of information to each hemisphere.
I simply want you to describe them to me. Just name the picture you see.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
So get ready and look right at the dot. Fixate the dot. Look right at the dot.
Football.
Fast.
Shoe. A woman. A person.
What else?
A girl. That's all.
Okay, I tell you what. Open your eyes. Your left hand. Right what she was doing. Close your eyes and just let your left hand go.
Vicky's right hemisphere doesn't have the language to describe the whole picture, but it can express itself through her left hand.
Good. What did you write?
Skipping rope.
Huh?
Skipping rope.
Skipping rope? No, let me show you what you wrote there.
Telephone.
Yeah, what was she doing?
Talking on the telephone.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Good. Perfect.
Vicky saw the picture on her left. It went to the left side of both eyes. The visual information then traveled to her right hemisphere. It understood the picture, but could only say, woman. Then she was instructed to write using her left hand. Her right hemisphere directed her hand to spell out the other feature of the picture. Dr. Gazaniga asked what she had written. The left hemisphere tried to guess. It had not seen telephone, so it searched for a word somehow associated with the image it had seen. When both hemispheres saw the written word, the left, which had heard the right say woman, could now give a complete description. Woman on the phone.
In Vicky, we are able to test the separate functioning of each hemisphere by the special kind of lateralized testing that you saw. In particular, in the case where we present visual information in her right visual field, which is over here, that information is projected in her left hemisphere, which is the normally dominant language and speech system in you and me as it is in Vicky. That means if I flash a letter over here, she can normally name it, a picture, or anything else. However, when you flash the same kind of information in the left visual field, which goes to the right hemisphere, you find that Vicky is not able to easily name it because of the structure having been sectioned. The communication between the two half brains has been eliminated. How about another one here? You're doing just perfect. Oh, this is a good one.
I don't know how.
Both hemispheres respond to the words. The left triggers her smile, the right makes her clap.
So what did you see that time?
Both sides receive the command at the same time, but the left side can communicate its awareness.
Am I supposed to be saying two words on this?
Well, you never can tell. Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Talking, listening, responding to words. These are expressions of verbal awareness. For most of us, the left hemisphere specializes in verbal information. It's capable of understanding a word as a series of sounds arranged in a meaningful sequence. But language in the left hemisphere is far more than a system of communication. It's a way of knowing the world.
Shadow tipping Bach.
It's very nice.
Virtually everyone learns to speak and understand, and with instruction, most people learn to read and write.
Sarah, what you fussing about? Sarah.
All human brains have a biological potential for language. Its foundations are laid in the womb, and we begin to build on them as soon as we're born. Our parents act as models, and we learn in predictable stages as experience changes the physical wiring of the brain. The languages can be Japanese, Swahili, French, but they all reshape the brain's original wiring, turning the potential for language into the ability to communicate. The area for language on the left side is more densely wired and even structured differently than the same area on the right. In 1861, Paul Broca discovered the left hemisphere's role in language. This brain changed the course of neuroscience. It belonged to a stroke patient nicknamed Ta. He was given that name because Ta was all he could say. After Ta died, Paul Broca examined his brain. Because Ta could not speak, Broca concluded the damaged part of the left hemisphere was responsible for language. It's now called Broca's area. Ta's brain was recently rediscovered in a Paris museum. Scientists x-rayed it with a CAT scan. The black area in the left hemisphere is where the damage occurred. We now know that Broca was largely right. Damage to Broca's area does disrupt language. Until his stroke, Charles Landry had a thriving legal practice. At age 45, a blood clot cut off circulation to part of his brain and put an end to his professional career. At the heart of practicing law is a facility for language. Landry's stroke affected both his ability to understand language and his ability to express himself.
Contingent reminder is sell it, sign it, deliver it, or anything subject to the contingency. Oh, boy.
When we talk about language difficulties, we mean problems with either grammar or the choice of words. And if you were listening to him, someone might say, well, his grammar's all right, and even though he takes a long time to find the words, he tends to find them. His difficulties are really all mechanical ones. He's slow, he's got trouble getting going, but none of this is really language disturbance. Well, I think that problem gets resolved very quickly when we start to examine his understanding of language. Do you ever have any trouble with what I say?
No.
Understanding it?
No.
Well, suppose you wanted to communicate with a person who was in a distant city. What apparatus would you utilize?
Telephone.
Very good. All right. I deliberately made that sort of a curious sentence just to show how well you did. All right. Now let me ask you, do dogs fly?
No.
No. And how about this? Do submarines usually fly?
No.
Mm-hmm. How about a Zeppelin? Can a Zeppelin fly?
Yes.
All right. Okay. I couldn't make the question complicated enough in terms of the fanciness of the vocabulary to throw him off. He immediately understood. And yet, when I produced a sentence that most of us would have thought was about as easy an English phrase as you could create, he failed totally. You know what a leopard is?
Yeah.
You know what a lion is?
Yes.
All right. So the leopard was killed by the lion. Which animal died?
I don't know.
That's hard, is it?
No. I don't know. What animal died? I don't know.
You don't know what animal died?
Right.
Obviously, that's got to be an error in understanding the grammar. Now, there's a very easy way to understand it, because if you think of those sentences with the grammatical words removed and try to figure out their meaning, you would have the same problem.
Landry hears all the sounds of the grammatical words, but in his brain, the sentence is processed something like this. He understands only nouns and verbs.
This pattern of having this special kind of understanding difficulty, which is confined almost exclusively to these little words, to the grammatical words and to the endings, is something that we find very frequently in the patient who's got damage to Broca's area. So the thing that's so perplexing in Mr. Landry is that he doesn't have this difficulty in spontaneous speech, he doesn't have this difficulty in repetition, but when we come to the comprehension tests, he has this difficulty in the most dramatic fashion. And if I said to you again, right, that's my uncle's sister, would that be a man or a woman?
I don't know, because...
In 1874, the German scientist Karl Wernicke identified a third language area in the left hemisphere. Broca's area in front plays a major role in speech production and grammar. The strip in the middle controls and coordinates movement, but Wernicke's area is involved both in the formation of what is said and in comprehension. When it's damaged, speech seems fluent but doesn't make sense.
Now, the question that comes up is that given that these two areas are there, why are they in the locations that they are? And it's, in fact, it turns out not to be an accident. Because if you think about it, until 100 years ago, practically everybody was illiterate, and most people were not only illiterate, but they were descended from a long line of equally illiterate people. And language was, therefore, for the overwhelming majority of humankind, something which came in the ear and came out of the mouth. And if you look back here, here's the Wernicke's area in back, and that's next to the cortical area for hearing. And then in front, we've got Broca's area, and that's next to the part which controls the muscles of speech. So we have them in specific relationship to hearing and to speech production.
We now know how we process and repeat words. First, sound travels as nerve impulses to Wernicke's area, where it's analyzed, to Broca's area, where sounds are assembled into sequences, and finally to the motor cortex, which directs movement and sends signals to the speech muscles. Charles Landry's brain damage doesn't fall neatly into either Broca's or Wernicke's area. But from patients like him, we have learned a great deal about how the left hemisphere decodes, processes, and produces language.
Last 3 times I caught fish. Oh,
The right side of the brain specializes in a different set of skills. It recognizes shapes and patterns in space. It makes sense out of a map. It thinks in pictures, not words. Architects express this ability when they turn raw space into a mix of form and function. A sculptress expresses it when she transforms imagination into clay. Because the right hemisphere has these spatial abilities, scientists believed that recognizing faces and places, turning a complex pattern into something familiar, was a right hemisphere specialty. Several years ago, Paulette had a stroke. She can no longer recognize anyone.
Since then, she has been complaining mostly about the impossibility of recognizing faces and places. This is a very serious problem. And in her everyday life, Paulette constantly has the feeling she's living in a foreign place among strangers.
Sometimes people say hi to me, so I say hi to them. Other times I say hi to people I believe I know, and they say, "Who is she? What does she want?" So I've been traumatized. And now I don't say hi to anybody, except when people call, "Hi, Paulette," or when I recognize friends from their voices.
On regarde une autre série de photographies. Quoi?
What?
I'm looking for his name.
Quel âge?
How old is he?
Over 70.
Over 70, right.
He has a little mustache.
Yes.
And inquisitive eyes with a mocking look.
Yes, perfect description. He was president of the Republic as well.
C'est le Général de Gaulle? Le Général de Gaulle.
Oh, Charles, I didn't recognize you.
Allez.
Paulette's vision is not impaired. She can describe the face perfectly, but she cannot translate those details into a flash of recognition. She suffers from prosopagnosia. The parts of her brain that specialize in recognizing faces have been destroyed.
His face is familiar, but I can't put a name to it.
Well, who is he? Can you at least tell me what he does?
I think he's a singer.
Bon, la suivante.
Well, go ahead. Describe his face.
A little pimple on the side over there. In fact, 3 of them. I won't look any closer because he's got too many. He should go and see a skin doctor. To have his skin cleaned, because it's in bad shape. His eyes smile as well as his mouth.
Yes.
And his hair?
What about his hair?
It's quite thin.
Don't you think that's me? Don't you?
No. Or maybe you've got makeup on.
In the past, face recognition was thought to be confined to the right hemisphere. Today, we know differently.
That's me.
That's you? It's not a recent picture then.
This is a PET scan of a normal brain with normal activity on both sides. This is a scan of the brain of a patient with prosopagnosia. Both hemispheres have structural damage.
Now the odds are, or I suppose, I'm not sure I should say the odds, but one good guess is that each side of the brain is contributing something a little different to face recognition. That is, the right half of the brain may be contributing more to the overall outline and pattern of the face. The left side may be better at picking up small details, but it's clear, again, that both sides of the brain have to be participating in that function as well.
I am mad at myself. I'm really mad. I don't recognize myself anymore. It gets on my nerves, that's the truth. It happens all the time that I hit my head whenever I make mistakes. I hit my head to put everything back in place.
Face recognition, spatial skills, language. We now understand something about the way they're organized. But what controls brain organization, and what influences brain development in general? Potentially important findings on the edge of brain science provide some clues, though very controversial clues, on how our genetic blueprint is affected by culture and surroundings. The island nation of Japan has its own ancient traditions. Centuries of isolation left it with a culture that is both intricate and unique. Children learn 2 kinds of script in school. One is a phonetic script called kana. In kana, each symbol stands for a specific syllable. As language, it's processed in the left hemisphere. The other form of writing is called kanji. It's a pictorial system which is perceived visually. A single character can have several meanings and sounds. Because of its visual nature, kanji is processed at least partly in the right hemisphere. This is the symbol for sun, which the Japanese adopted from the Chinese around the 4th century AD. It's clearly pictorial, a right hemisphere specialty. Over time, the symbol changed. It began to lose its pictorial qualities. Today's symbol is angular, radically different from its original form, but it still conveys visual information and is probably processed mostly in the right hemisphere. Culture is an important factor in organizing the brain, and language is a crucial part of culture. Dr. Tadanobu Tsunoda maintains that the language a child learns influences the way the two hemispheres develop. He tested Japanese and Western subjects and found that the two groups seemed to process language differently. The Japanese process sounds like crying in the left hemisphere. Westerners process these sounds in the right.
日本人がこういう雨の音だとか、それから虫の音だとか。
The Japanese people are very sensitive to the sounds of nature, like the sound of rain, the sound of crickets, and the sounds of cicadas. To the Japanese, these sounds have meaning like words and are processed in the left hemisphere. Westerners treat these sounds as noise. The difference is that for the Japanese, these noise-like sounds have meaning. Therefore, though the sounds of nature don't have meaning, we Japanese treat them like language and process them in the left hemisphere. Westerners treat them as noise and process them in the right hemisphere.
Dr. Tsunoda's work has come under fire, but many agree with his basic idea, that culture has a biological effect on the way skills are organized in the brain. The Aborigines of Australia have survived the trackless wastes of the continent for centuries. To do so, they have developed extraordinary visuospatial skills, a feature of the right hemisphere. Has the combination of experience and evolution changed the way they think? Aboriginal children do not perform as well as white Australian children on conventional verbal tests. One psychologist, Judy Carnes, thought the tests might be ignoring the Aborigines' real skills.
The children I've found know a great deal more than I do, and a great deal more than most white Australian people. They take for granted that we possess most of the knowledge they have, and we don't. They think that a sense of direction is built into everybody, for instance. And also, the same thing applies to all their knowledge about the wildlife of their region. They don't really seem to think that any of their knowledge is special, and it is very much so.
Dr. Carnes believes that Aboriginal children use their visual and spatial memories more than white children. She invented a game to test her theory. The task, to remember the positions of a set of objects on a board. The man-made object should be easier for verbally oriented children to remember, because natural objects are not as easily described and remembered in words. Carnes used both natural and man-made objects.
All right, open your eyes and see.
The most difficult group of all to describe verbally, 12 stones. Philomena has 30 seconds to memorize the positions of the stones. She can take as long as she likes to put them back.
Finished? Very good. I'll tell you, they're almost all in the right places. That one's right, that one's right, that one's right, that one's right. So is that and that and that. That is, that is, that is, that is. These two should be swapped around. Do you think so? I've tested children between the ages of 6-something and about 16 years and a bit now. And they always perform better than white Australian children. Oh, and also the rate of superiority, if you like, stays about the same. They perform at about about 3 years ahead of the white Australian children, so that an Aboriginal child of 7 years would perform about as well as a 10-year-old white Australian child. Not quite as well, but it's about a 3-year difference. They also tend to perform these tasks in even ways in terms of tempo. They don't hurry in and put a few back and then slow down. They seem to perform at the same rate all the time. And they also don't mutter or mumble, which a lot of white Australian children have done while they were viewing the tasks, I think in efforts to learn the names, hoping that that would help them to remember where the items went.
The two groups of children use different strategies and perhaps different parts of their brains to solve the puzzles. Culture is not the only influence on the brain's blueprint. In fact, there are differences more universal than those between Japanese and Westerners, Aborigine and white. We now know that there are important differences between the brains of the two basic groups that comprise humankind, males and females.
I think that evidence which exists suggests that women are on the average better verbally than men. On the other hand, there is evidence men have better spatial function. It doesn't mean that there aren't women who don't have absolutely superb spatial function, and there are plenty of men like myself whose spatial function is abysmal, clearly. So it doesn't come to you because you're a man, or it's not necessarily not there because you're a woman. We're simply talking about statistics.
The question of even minor statistical differences between men and women is a highly charged issue. Both sexes have strong feelings about the very idea, and the evidence is only beginning to emerge. Nevertheless, there are statistical differences. They exist, for example, in the senses, smell, hearing, and touch, as well as in hand preference. It's now thought that hand preference is affected by sex hormones during brain development. About 10% of males are left-handed, compared to only 4% of females. Left-handers actually respond differently to the world. They include a higher percentage of artists, architects, and athletes. And they suffer more learning disabilities like stuttering, autism, and dyslexia.
Well, if you go back and say to yourself, what is it that's altering the brain to make people left-handed or to make them dyslexic or stutterers and so on, you could then say, yes, we think that there is some chemical influence, very possibly male-related, possibly testosterone, which is altering the way the brain develops on the left side.
How do left-handers develop differently, and what is the effect of sex hormones? Every male fetus receives jolts of testosterone from the testes. Gershwin suspects left-handers receive more. This is testosterone. Does the extra dose slow brain development in the left hemisphere, shifting males from a right-handed pattern to a left-handed one? We don't know. But we do have evidence of the power of sex hormones to shape the brain and body. Rats, like humans, have divided brains. Using special techniques to freeze, slice, and measure the cortex, Professor Marion Diamond at the University of California at Berkeley has found structural differences between the two hemispheres. She has also found sex differences. Female brains have thicker left hemispheres. Males have thicker right hemispheres. To find out whether she could reverse this male-female pattern, Diamond manipulated the early hormonal environment.
We decided to take the ovaries out of the rats when they were first born, and then look at the right-left differences when the rats were young adults. And we found that the pattern had switched. Instead of having a large left hemisphere, we found a larger right hemisphere, very similar to the pattern in the male, especially in the visual spatial area.
Diamond also removed the testes of males at birth and found that the front two-thirds of the brain switched to a female pattern. In a second experiment, rats are exposed to 3 different environments: a barren, impoverished environment, a standard colony, and an enriched environment filled with toys and social contact. Could these environments actually have an effect on the size and shape of the cortex?
The results show that the enriched rat's brain is larger than the standard colony, and the impoverished rat's cortex, actually, is smaller than the standard colony. So in essence, with enrichment, the brain grows, and with impoverishment, it decreases in size. We find sex differences in the animals that have been exposed to the enriched environment. In the males, we find greater changes in their visual spatial areas. In the females, we find greater changes in their general sensory cortex.
By measuring the thickness of the cortex, Dr. Diamond can judge the effects of these environments. She has two consistent findings. Experience can change the cortex at any age, and there are sex differences in how the cortex responds.
We don't have too much hesitation in extrapolating our findings from rats to man, because brains are made of nerve cells, whether we're dealing with rats or men.
No one has identified differences in the anatomy of the human brain with such precision. But if experience affects the two sides of the brain differently, it may also account for some of the sex differences in humans. Caroline Smith is studying how we treat children. She asked mothers to play with children they have never met before.
He's 6 months, so he can't really sit up. So if you put him down on the floor, put a hand behind him to support him. But that's it. You can do what you like, where you like, for 10 minutes.
Smith is analyzing the difference between mothers' reactions to girls and to boys.
What would you like to see? What would you like to see? Would you like to see that? Would you just like to say hello for a minute, would you? That's a funny noise, isn't it?
The toys the mothers offer the babies are influenced by the child's sex.
Hello. 1, 2, 3. Would you like to hold this for a minute? That's a nice smile. That's a nice smile. Would you like to sit on the floor for a minute? Can you crawl? Are you going to start to grow?
Boys are encouraged to be active, to explore their environment.
Here's the ball. There. That's right, you're getting there. A little bit further. That's it. You've got it. That's right. You've got it. What can you do with it? Off we go.
But sometimes the children are disguised.
Yeah. Look at this. Oh, my goodness me. My goodness me.
Jamie is a boy, but for the next person, he'll appear to be a girl.
Is it funny? It's funny being a girl, is it? Yeah.
His mother will hand him over as Jane.
There we are. There's a little girl. Very pretty. Very pretty. Okay. Here's Jane. There we are.
Jane. Oh, you are lovely, darling. Aren't you sweet? Look at the lovely darling.
Smith finds that we talk more to girls. We often tell them they are pretty, and we encourage them to be less active than boys.
A little bit of yellow here.
So we do treat boys and girls differently.
She's smiling at you, Jane.
We offer them different experiences, encourage different abilities.
She is. She's smiling right at you.
But the question remains, are the different characteristics of males and females mainly the result of experience? Or are they built into the two-sided brain?
Oh, yes. Oh, sweetheart. You're such a pretty girl. Such a pretty girl. Oh, darling. Look.
The answer is probably both. Yet this knowledge tells us practically nothing about individual men and women. Our specialized two-sided brain ensures that we vary in our tastes and talents, skills and abilities, needs and wants. In the end, both sides of the brain work together during most complicated activities. These athletes, for instance, test their limits every time they step onto the floor. They have a keen sense of shapes moving in space, but they also plan, forecast, create, and their creative act involves the whole brain. We are all creative. Whether we're speaking, designing, building, puzzling out the differences between boys and girls, or cooking the perfect meal. It's all a product of our inheritance and environment, of our divided yet harmonious brain. The combination gives us a full range of abilities. It accounts for the richness of human thought, the flexibility of human behavior. It drives the flow of intelligence, and it leaves us all with one extraordinary gift, the capacity to create. Research into the two brains is still in its infancy. Many questions are still unanswered. For instance, do the two sides of the brain really think differently, or is the difference more apparent than real? Do some of us actually rely more on one side than the other? Or does that broad avenue between the two halves, the corpus callosum, minimize our dependency? Someday, we may have a handle on these difficult issues. We may know more completely the effects of culture and sex hormones on our brain's organization. But today, we've reached a point of understanding far above what we once knew. That is, that the left and right sides of our brains together deliver to us the sum total of our thoughts and our knowledge. I'm George Page.